Yeah, I think I mentioned stablecoin earlier. I truly believe that stablecoin or stablecoins will essentially become the rails for payments. I think you're already starting to see some pretty big movement in it. I don't know if you saw this, but it's a few months ago now. Stripe acquired a company called Bridge for about $1 billion. At least that's what was reported. And it's a pretty big signal, right? But it's a lot of money. But whether it's that you see Visa, you see Mastercard, you see PayPal actually launch its own stablecoin. They're all really starting to play around the space. They're all investigating pretty thoroughly. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? We can talk also a lot about how efficient stablecoin make payments, but yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things we'll start seeing playing out in a big way over the next couple of years.
Welcome back to Only the Savvy. I'm Nicole, and today I'm joined by Jesse Bornstein, Global Head of Business Development at SonarX. Jesse is a pioneer in the world of blockchain and Web3 innovation. Welcome to the show, Jesse.
Hey, Nicole, thank you for having me.
Let's start with your background in blockchain and Web3. Can you tell us about what sparked your interest in this space and how did you get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. This is now almost 10 years ago. I was at a company called LiquidX, and we were focused on trade finance as an asset class, and we were a startup building a marketplace for that. And in about 2016, we started thinking about ways to bring those assets onto blockchain. And so this is before the terms like RWA or tokenization were kind of part of the vernacular. But we were thinking very seriously about it because it's a very labor and paper intensive asset class. So it made a lot of sense that blockchains would be a good solution as a technology. And because I was looking at blockchain, I happened to read the Ethereum white paper, based on a recommendation from a friend, and just got really, really interested in smart contracts and essentially, what that could mean and the implications could be for other financial, markets, essentially. So always had been tracking the space. Then in about 2021, kind of DeFi, decentralized finance, was becoming not like you couldn't ignore it. Every time you looked at it, there was another $10 billion of TVL coming into the space, and so I made the move to get much more crypto native. I started working for a liquid staking company called StakeCount. It was one of the first liquid staking companies to come to market. And then had various roles. I was at Defiance ETFs. We were building out a crypto index fund, actually. And then fast forward to a couple years ago, joined the team with SonarX to essentially build out the go-to-market for SonarX, which we can talk about today.
So, what do you think are some common misconceptions about blockchain and Web3 that you'd like to clear up in the beginning of this interview for us?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a lot of things that get conflated when we think about blockchain and we think about crypto. And even just something like Bitcoin and something like Ethereum, I think are just two very, very different things that happen to use the same technology, so they kind of get lumped together. Where you have something like Bitcoin and people can have their arguments for it and against it. And I'm not here to debate that, but for the most part, it's kind of being treated as digital gold, right? And we kind of are ascribing value to it, and it's a hedge against inflation and governments printing money. But Ethereum is a technology and now many blockchains that are essentially allowing for smart contracts, which is allowing for a whole new paradigm of applications, right, that can leverage these blockchains because they're a really efficient way to transfer value, right? And as a manifestation of that, yes, you wind up with all these cryptocurrencies that some have value, some don't, some have rationale, some don't. But I think I like to decouple like the technology of blockchain from cryptocurrencies as a traded asset class, right? And where I'm really more focused is coming at it from a technology standpoint and trying to think about like, okay, what is the world going to look like because of this technology in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So that's really how I think about the world.
So take us back to the early days of SonarX and what inspired the SonarX team to create this project, and what were some of the biggest challenges that you guys faced when getting started?
Yeah, for sure. So just a quick background on the team. So we're all traditional finance folks. The CEO and CTO, so the core builders of SonarX's platform, and I'll get into exactly what we do. But they are think of them as data architecture, database architecture, data engineering experts, right? And this is teams that have worked on, like very big companies and big company data sets like Sony, Zillow, Pimco, right? So like all big names in various industries, but with a key focus on big data, right? And so the team really understands that landscape and what's called columnar databases, which is essentially used for these, for big data. And it's with that background that we started when we were looking at the blockchain space. We realized that blockchains has like a big data problem because they emit an immense amount of data. The data is coming rapidly, and these blockchains don't sleep. They're 24/7. Um, Even when you deal directly with the blockchain with something what's called a node, you can get very bad data quality. Um, and now all these problems are magnified by the fact that there are many different blockchains that are relevant that people care about, right? So it's created this very large, like, big data problem and a data engineering challenge for folks who are kind of focused on the space. And pretty much anything you're doing around the space, you obviously need the data, right? So that's essentially like what we're up to. That's kind of how we got started. Um, in terms of the challenges, I think, like any startup, right? We got going about 3 years ago. So typical growing pains, building the right team, uh, kind of figuring out like, because when we're building out our platform, it's data. So there's a lot of different things you can do with data, right? And so I think we had to be very careful about the types of things like early customers were asking, and making sure we didn't go down paths that, just because we wanted to satisfy an early need, like to go kind of our whole direction down that path, right? So we had to be very careful around that. Fast forward a little bit, now our challenges are they're good, right? They're good challenges to have, which is we've now built a very nice customer base, and we try to deliver very white glove service. And so we have customers because the blockchain industry is very international. So you have customers in Europe, in Asia, in the US, and trying to cover that with very high, white glove service across continents and time zones is challenging as a small team, right? But like I said, these are good challenges to have because we're working very closely with our clients and we're bringing on more clients. So all positive, but that's kind of what we're living with right now.
So going into more detail about SonarX, can you tell us about SonarX's mission and vision? What problem does it aim to solve, and how does it contribute to the growth of Web3?
Yeah, thanks. So like I said, I mean, without getting too technical, there are lots of these like data engineering challenges around dealing with blockchain data. And at the end of the day, what that means for the user of any blockchain application or trader of cryptocurrency is less availability of applications on various blockchains, because whether it's a wallet or a decentralized exchange or stable coin, if companies who are building around that can't access the data, they can't really build on these various blockchains. The reason why that becomes a problem is that most digital assets that are designed today are designed to be blockchain agnostic, right? So, I assume you're familiar with stablecoin, right? So stablecoin gets launched probably normally on Ethereum, the blockchain. But now, if you're like Circle or Tether, you don't want that stablecoin just living on Ethereum. You want it to have the ability to live on every single blockchain that it can, because you're agnostic. You just want the users to use it wherever they are. And so that means now you need to have, USDT or USDC on Ethereum, on Solana, on Tron, Ton, name your blockchain, Cosmos, Polkadot. And this adds to that data engineering challenge, right? And that's really what we're trying to solve. And it's not just stablecoin. That's just a really good example. But anything being built on these blockchains is going to require this really state of the art kind of scaled data infrastructure, which is where we're focused. And just to nerd out a little bit, like when we talk about the data challenges, we're getting close to a petabyte of data, and the amount of data is like essentially doubling every year across all these blockchains. And then on top of that, because there's so many blockchains, each blockchain requires its own kind of subject matter expertise. So it becomes really, really hard for a team to manage this internally. And so what we're starting to see in the industry is instead of like companies dedicating, you know, 20 to 30 people to manage what I'm talking about, they're now saying, I don't want to build this myself. I want to like use SonarX, right? And even the most native companies, because a lot of people may have started to build this like data infrastructure themselves, but then it's no longer just Bitcoin or Ethereum that matter, right? Now there's just so many blockchains that they can't keep up with it, and it gets them too far away from their core competency, whatever that is. And so we're working with like risk analytics providers, right? The guys who are helping governments and law enforcement understand what's happening on chain. We're working with big financial index providers, so like the FTSE Russells of the world. We could talk a little bit more about that. We're working with like big four type auditors and tier right below that. So a lot of the kind of financial institution, enterprise, all our business is all B2B, so we're not really dealing too much with retail. But those are the folks that we're helping.
Wow, it sounds like you guys are making an impact already. How do you see SonarX making a positive impact just on society, possibly?
Yeah, look, I mean, in case it's not clear, I'm a pretty big believer in blockchain technology. I think what we're doing is untapping a lot of use cases. It might not be immediate, but I think it's the kind of thing that you won't know or hear about it, but all of a sudden access to so many different things will become available, and I think we're going to play a big part of that. One example of that actually is because this is a cool one, right? I'm sure most of your listeners take Uber and or Lyft, and everybody's noticing how expensive, especially Uber, is getting. I'm here in New York. I feel it. Um, I know a project, and this will take time. It won't happen overnight. But this project, like, there's no reason that what Uber's doing can't essentially be a decentralized application, right? And if you can get the right tooling, you can get the right data piped in, and this is all being worked on. And this isn't our expertise necessarily. We support it from a data perspective, but that's going to like I think whether it's Uber or Airbnb or like so many of these apps that we're accustomed today, I think will essentially wind up on decentralized rails, right? I don't know how long that'll take, but I think at the end of the day, it is going to mean you know more interesting, probably cheaper access to a lot of these applications that we live with today.
Speaking on that, have you seen or do you think there's some exciting innovations right now happening on blockchain that you know of or want to discuss, just like the Uber one?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, we're seeing a lot in the AI space, of course. Everybody's seeing that because we have so much data and we're so focused on data. Obviously, that's the fuel for all these LLMs or any sort of AI model. So there's some interesting stuff happening around crypto and AI. There is one thing actually that we're seeing, which is quite interesting. I mentioned earlier, but like financial index providers. So, we might get into this question a little bit later, but with the new administration, there's a lot of anticipation, at least in the U.S., of kind of a more business favorable regulatory environment, right? And so with that, we're starting to see a pretty big influx of asset managers, financial index providers. They're all starting to gear up for like pretty innovative products, right? And in order for them to get more innovative, they need to get closer and closer to on-chain data, which is what we're doing. So whether that means ETFs with staking rewards inside them or fundamental indexes, so like essentially understanding or building an index around uh, blockchains and cryptocurrencies based on the revenue that they're producing, which we can probably have a whole podcast around that.
Oh yeah, we definitely can. How do you see these developments impacting the industry as a whole? Are there any specific use cases or applications that you think have a huge potential for growth?
Yeah, I think I mentioned stablecoin earlier. I truly believe that stablecoin or stablecoins will essentially become the rails for payments. I think you're already starting to see some pretty big movement in it. I don't know if you saw this, but it's a few months ago now. Stripe acquired a company called Bridge for about $1 billion. At least that's what was reported. And it's a pretty big signal, right? But it's a lot of money. But whether it's that you see Visa, you see Mastercard, you see PayPal actually launch its own stablecoin. They're all really starting to play around the space. They're all investigating pretty thoroughly. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? We can talk also a lot about how efficient stablecoin make payments, but yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things we'll start seeing playing out in a big way over the next couple of years.
Now, stablecoins should be extremely interesting, especially this year with how everything is moving just the beginning of the year. It's very interesting where it's going to move, and we're just in
Yeah,
February. So
yeah, yeah,
let's see where it goes.
yeah. And the other thing I would say is, and we see this pretty acutely, but blockchains have gotten much cheaper essentially to build. A lot more people know how to do it. And the other thing is everything in most things in blockchain or crypto are built open source, right? And they're also meant to be composable, right? And as a result of that, there are like constantly new blockchains coming to market with their own niche or their own, this one's the fastest, this one's the cheapest, this one is specifically for, this type of activity. That's not going to stop. That's just going to keep going, right? And I think that in and of itself will also spur on a lot of innovation.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So I want to get into community building. Community is a crucial aspect of any successful project. Can you talk to us about what you've built and the engagement with your community at SonarX?
Yeah, happy to. So as I was kind of saying before, we're very B2B focused, right? And typically larger enterprise or financial institutions. So when we talk about our community, it's quite different than most of the time the word community is used in crypto. Um, but we try to be like customer obsessed and deliver like the most white glove service we possibly can because a lot of what we're seeing is the folks we deal with are really really strong with like blockchain expertise or whatever they're given like uh, domain is, right? Whether it's risk analytics, financial indexes, accounting, audit, whatever. um, but when it comes to the data engineering side, that's where our team like really shines, right? And we like to get really close. We like to understand what their stacks look like and really play a role in like optimizing that. And it's not like we charge for the service, right? But we're one, we learn a ton. Two, we feel like we can add a lot of value because again, coming back to the size of the data, when you're dealing with petabytes of data, if you do things the wrong way, you can be you can cost yourself a lot of money when it comes to querying on these big data sets and storing these big data sets, just generally managing them. So it's the most exciting thing when we're saving our companies like our clients a ton of money because we help think through like a more optimized stack. And to me, that's what's building a really strong community. And the kind of proof of that is like when we get referrals in, right? And people are like, "Oh, I heard about you guys, and we'd love to talk." And as a young company, there's nothing better than that.
No, there really is nothing better than that. And it sounds like you guys all do such a amazing job with taking care of your customers so they understand every part of what you guys are doing and providing for them. So it's amazing. So going into that a little bit more, what strategies have worked well for you and what advice would you give to other founders looking to build a strong community such as SonarX around their project?
Yeah, I would, running business development. This is just kind of my DNA, but I would say like network like crazy. Um, and one of the nice things about this industry is it's actually very, very collaborative, very open and accepting. And most people will take the time to have a chat with you. And I think we even met at a conference, but the conferences are really a great venue. It really brings a lot of like-minded people together. And when you have this kind of dynamic where people are open and collaborative, it really just it helps learn, it helps make contacts, and just again generally networking, and that's paid a lot of dividends for us, right? Especially in a B2B type environment where you're it's more hand-to-hand combat sales versus marketing and like the traditional community building. So that would definitely be one piece of advice. Another would is, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is try not to get distracted by every little request. As much as you want to be customer obsessed, like you really have to be very selective in terms of where you're going to spend your time and your brain power, because it's very limited, especially with early on as a small team, right? And there's also like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because like that's a very iterative process, right? And so where we started, going to market to where we are today, it's a very different story, very different narrative, very different pitch.
Great advice right there. Thank you for that. Shifting into regulatory environment, how do you see or how do you navigate the regulatory environment as a blockchain company?
Yeah, like so we don't have a token. We don't really have any plans for a token or anything like that. So we're a little less, I guess the word is exposed from a risk perspective. Um, where it actually brings a lot of opportunity to us, the regulatory environment, because either it's becoming more business friendly, in which case we see like the financial index providers, the asset managers, everybody wants to start like building things on chain. To build things on chain, you need the data. But even if it starts to become less business friendly and a little bit more, whatever the word is, right? Like stricter, then it creates use cases around like, okay, well, we need to be monitoring all this activity. We need to understand what's happening on chain, and so that brings on like the risk analytics type players and the regulators and the law enforcement agencies, right? And even the sovereign, even the governments. Um, so kind of both ends of the spectrum like drive opportunity from our perspective, and again, because we don't have a token, we're not like really exposed to it. Now, look, obviously, however regulation plays out, I want it to be positive for our industry, which is obviously, rising tides rise all ships. Maybe we can edit that out, but whatever that saying is. So yeah, like it's typically only tailwinds from our perspective, either way it goes.
That's really positive to hear. So, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing companies in this space right now?
Um, so because we talk about it all day, of course, I'm
Mm.
going to go to like these data infrastructure challenges, right? One of the problems with what we're seeing is that there's so much data. Everybody has a different data stack, meaning they're either, everybody's pretty much on cloud that we deal with. So it's either they're in AWS, they're in GCP, maybe they're in Azure. They're using data in different databases. So maybe it's Snowflake, maybe it's Databricks, maybe it's ClickHouse, like wherever. And so you have all of this like replication happening and like lots of cost in terms of computing on all this data, in terms of storing all this data, and in terms of moving all this data. And so it's costing people a lot of money. And not only is it costing money, it's costing time and it's costing a lot of resources to be dedicated to this. So, again, that's why we feel like we're solving a real problem, and it's why we're continuing to kind of grow our business. Um, so yeah, I mean that's really what we're seeing, what we're kind of talking about all day. I'm sure there's plenty of things that are challenging. I mean, of course, like figuring out where the real mass adoption, I think, is a major one, right? Like, will it be stablecoin? Will it be some app that I talked about earlier that's going to try to be a decentralized Uber or whatever? Like, I still think that remains to be seen, what and how we get there, right? And
Absolutely.
it's been talked about for a while, but like the UI kind of needs a facelift, and
Oh, yeah.
we need to make it easier for everybody to use this stuff. And my general feeling is that people shouldn't and won't know they're even using blockchains, right? Like it really that should be the least important part of it. In the same way, no one knows how emails actually work or like
Yeah,
the technologies it's on, but we know it works and we trust it.
absolutely. No, that's definitely true right there. Can you walk us through some of the technical advances that SonarX has made recently?
Yeah, so one of the things we've been really excited about, we've launched a real-time product. So it means the second that data is coming off the blockchain, it will be in our data sets, it'll be indexed, curated, we also do a very heavy-duty data quality check on it. And so we have that from Genesis to near tip. That's our kind of core product, but now we just released a real-time product. The other thing is we just crossed 100 blockchains covered. So really excited about that. And until recently, our strategy has very much been to be horizontal, meaning cover as many blockchains as possible. But now, given we're at 100, and we're not going to stop, we're going to keep expanding, but we kind of now can add new chains very quickly just because of our models and the way we're set up. But now we're going to start getting a lot more like detailed and quote unquote vertical, like within the data sets, right? So again, we consider ourselves data infra, but now because we have all this data, there's so many things we can do with it, and so many things our clients are doing with it, and now we can play a bigger role in helping that. Like whether that is, having really high quality data around staking rewards for an entire blockchain or token supply, which, believe it or not, is actually not an easy thing to do. You would think it'd be very simple, but it's not. And part of that is because, and maybe this comes back to the challenges, but blockchains are really good for what's called writing or like executing transactions. They're not very good for reading, right? Or doing analytical, work and understanding what's actually happening from a past tense perspective. So, yeah, so just kind of building around that. And then one other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, you have all these different data stacks. So we're now focused on like how do we streamline the cost of having all of this data in so many different places. We're working pretty hard on that, and hopefully middle to end of this year we'll have some pretty cool innovation on it.
That sounds really exciting, especially this real time data. It's very exciting. It definitely has my antennas sparked up for wanting to learn more about that. So, how have these improvements enhanced user experience or even contributed to the scalability?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, because you have these blockchains, like the number of blockchains keeps growing. Whatever our clients do, like again, whether it's risk analytics, right, or even like crypto tax software or accounting or whatever, the fact that we can cover whatever chain they need covered, and it's over 100 of them, they can do their business on those chains for their customers, right? So it's a very, not only do we like save costs, but we actually enable, you know, revenue growth, right? Because now they can go to their customers and say, oh, hey, customers who need crypto tax software, I used to only have Ethereum and Polygon or whatever. Now I have Solana. Now I have, Berachain, which just got launched, or these chains keep getting launched. And
Yeah, bear
how
chain.
do you keep up with that? Yeah, we actually are covering that today. It's just launched. I don't know when this will air, but
Oh, that's
February
exciting.
6th. Yeah.
Because their mainnet just got launched, right? Or it's about to get
Yeah,
launched?
yeah, mainnet today, literally this morning. So we were really excited. So another way we're helping customers, they'll come to us and they'll say, "Hey, like we really need this chain covered the first day it's live. Can you guys help?" And the answer is yes. And so that was a really cool case study. We got that done, and they're very happy about it. Um, but another example of like if we can cover a chain, it means they can, and they can kind of expand revenue into those chains and the users of those chains.
Wow, that's very exciting. So let's jump back into a little bit of partnerships and collaborations here. Have there been any notable partnerships that you guys have or collaborations that have helped drive growth for SonarX?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can give you two of the more mainstream names, and then probably two more like industry native names. So I think one is, which we're so excited about, is AWS. So in December, we announced a big partnership with them they have an initiative to do a lot of things around Web3 actually. One of the ones specifically that we've announced is around open data. So they actually are taking portions of our data set and putting it out for completely for free. And it's for experimental work, it's for research. It's obviously doesn't have our SLAs and our service, with it, but it is still pretty cool, and it's a cool sign to like them showing like, hey, we're kind of coming into the space in a bigger way, and they don't want to stop there. We launched 5 chains with them, but we'll probably kind of do a lot more as time goes on. Uh, One of the things we're so excited about that is, they really in a lot of ways are considered the gold standard in terms of at least cloud infrastructure. So by them kind of signaling, hey, we like SonarX's platform, we agree with the data quality, the infra is really good here. We think that's a really great sign for the market. And then, there's a couple other things we're working on. They're very private about it, so can't say too much about it. But a really cool partnership. Another one we just launched last week actually is with FTSE Russell. So again, in the index provider space, but top 1, 2 index providers in the world. They are looking to do a lot of really cool stuff in this space, and I think that's not only is it a good sign for us, but it's a good sign for the industry, right? They obviously when they both AWS and FTSE, whenever these two are going to do anything in their lanes, they're looking at big opportunities, right? So I think it's really positive. Um, and then two more industry native ones. We have a partnership with a company called Kaiko, and they're very focused on pricing data and what's called market data. So helping people understand of things that are happening on the blockchain, the price of assets and transfers around that, because that's all actually happening off chain, like coming up with what pricing is. So obviously there's a lot of synergy there. We're focused on the on-chain data. They're very focused on like quote unquote market data. And so putting those two pieces together is actually quite helpful for a lot of clients, again, depending on the use case. And then one last one is Tatum, which is a node provider. And so we work very closely with node providers, and we have a lot of customer overlap, given what the exact use case is, but kind of working together to come up with products to bring to kind of our overlap customers, just given we're both kind of playing in this like raw data slash index data space around on-chain data, right? So like we're more on the like data infrastructure, they're more on like node infrastructure, right? And there's a lot of overlap there, but I don't want to get too technical.
Thank you for that. That sounds like a lot of exciting partnerships, though, and collaborations that you guys are all working on.
Thank you.
I want to jump a little into education and adoption here. How important is education in driving adoption for blockchain technology? And what role does SonarX play in educating users about Web3 innovation?
Yeah, so it's very, very important to answer your question. I also think the forum and the way it's delivered and what's being delivered to who is extremely important. Where we play and what I'm very proud of is that we enable people who do like data analytics, data insight, all research to take our data and really help show everybody and depict what's going on these blockchain networks. Because the cool thing about them is they are public ledgers, right? Meaning we can see everything that's happening. Now there are challenges around it, and that's where we come in to help. But we work with a lot of the data analytics providers in the space to help them show the world what's actually happening. For example, companies like Glassnode, Masari, even Kaiko, right? These guys do really really good research, and it's very most of them are more focused on like the institutional crowd. So when we say education, a lot of it's kind of more like you'd think of, a traditional assets like research, right? Like and research around and understanding of what's going on about it. And that's really a use case we're helping, solve a lot. But then a lot of them also will have what's more like community or retail focused platforms and, helps educate again what's happening on these blockchains. To be clear, a lot of that is around tokens moving and the price and who's holding what. I think it will be interesting when we start seeing more about like the tangible things that are happening, right? Like we see it happening on chain, but what does that mean in the real world? I'm looking forward to more platforms like that coming out. I think we will see that very, very soon.
Absolutely. No, it definitely will be on the horizon for us. I just saw yesterday, recently, some company created a blockchain for kids course, and they did this whole course with pretty much future devs that were so excited working with blockchain, learning about it. So it was cool to see someone bringing it to a different age group and seeing that excitement from them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the two things, right? So obviously the education, and I think at this point, because there is a lot of money spent on marketing in this space, but I think at this point a lot of people who kind of at least need to be aware of it are and understand what's happening at a high level. But I think there's also like a de-risking that is happening actually right now, meaning if I'm looking to invest in building a project, right? I'm at a company, a bank, financial services, whatever the industry is, and I'm literally the person who has to make that decision. Like I can get fired if I make the wrong decision. If I go on some blockchain and there's some fraud or some nefarious behavior, right? Like that is a risk that like it's a perceived risk, right? We can have all the debate about why that's not really a risk, but it doesn't matter because it's perceived to be a risk. And so the more you have a company like BlackRock or Fidelity or AWS or Google, like the more you have them building in this space, it really does send a signal like this isn't like what you're thinking, right? Like this isn't crazy cowboy stuff. And yeah, maybe there's some of that going on, but that's not what this is, right? And so
No.
the more you have that, the more it de-risks it in a lot of people's eyes. And you know, if I'm at some financial institution, and I want to build a product and bring it on chain, I can now point to BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, SocGen, like any of these guys and be like, well, they put a product on chain.
Yeah.
Like what are we so afraid of, right? And that also means there's a blueprint, right, to how you do it. And I think that part of the education, is going to continue. But I think that part is important too, right? Because from a retail perspective, like we were saying earlier, they don't really need to know exactly how the technology
No.
is working, right?
No, not at all. Looking ahead, what are some exciting developments on the horizon for SonarX? Are there any exciting developments or projects on the horizon? I know you mentioned AWS, but is there anything we should be keeping an eye out?
Yeah, so uh, like I said, we are working very hard. It's just pretty technical, but from a customer's perspective, it's pretty exciting because it does mean a significant drop in cost
That's
in
good.
terms of getting data to be agnostic where it is, what database, what cloud environment, right? And so you'll see us start to make a lot of noise around that in, again, hopefully not too distant future.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Lastly, what advice would you give to our listeners who are interested in learning more about blockchain and data management and cleaning?
Yeah, well, if for your listeners who are interested in data infrastructure, please reach out and come to our website.
Yes.
But no, seriously, I mentioned a couple of these places, but they are really good resources, right? Whether it's a Glassnode or a Masari, I think these folks do a really good job of helping like crystallize and depict actually what's happening. A couple other places like RWA.xyz, Artemis, right? Really smart people that are doing some really good work and putting out really good research too. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Obviously, there's no shortage of podcasts in this space.
Yes.
um, and I think the conferences are a great place to learn too, right? Sometimes they can be a little expensive, but I at least for me, I learn the most talking to people, and you can do a lot of that at these conferences.
Will SonarX be at any upcoming conferences this year?
Yes, we will be at a few. I will be at ETH Denver in
Oh,
a
that's
couple of
very
weeks.
soon. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be at Consensus. We'll be at
Nice.
Token 2049, both Dubai and Singapore.
Wow.
Bitcoin 2025. Yeah, we plan to be everywhere.
Nice. Which consensus will you guys be at? Both or?
We will be attending Hong Kong. We will be sponsoring Toronto.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Will you have a table there? Will
Yes.
anyone?
Yeah.
Oh,
We will
awesome.
have a
I'll
booth.
have to
Yeah.
stop
So
by.
yeah, please do.
Have to stop by. All right. Finally, where can our audience learn more about SonarX and stay up to date on your work? Give us all the socials, all of that detail.
Sure. So, on our website, to reach out, happy to kind of talk to people who are interested in the data infrastructure side. Find us on LinkedIn, find us on X. Can follow me personally. I tend to do a lot of the posting for our company. So, yeah, kind of the usual suspects.
Awesome. Very exciting. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again, Jesse, for being on the show. I look forward to seeing what else SonarX is going to be working on and bringing out into the industry. It's extremely exciting to hear everything that you guys are working on.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And thanks for everyone tuning in to Only the Savvy. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, stay savvy.
SIM swap fraud is sweeping the globe, and your mobile security is at risk. Switch to Efani and lock out SIM swap fraud and get the most elite mobile protection in the world. Efani guarantees 100% protection from SIM swaps backed by a $5 million insurance policy. Stay secure with reliable coverage, free international roaming, and unlimited data. Trust Efani to keep your communications and assets secure. Get military-grade protection, 24/7 concierge service, and a hassle-free upgrade. Click the link below for $150 off. Thanks for watching. Help support this channel and receive exclusive offers from one of our partners located in the description. We'll see you on the next one.